Good morning. The 9,561st meeting of the Security Council is called to order. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute on behalf of the Council to Her Excellency Ms. Caroline Rodriguez-Baguette, Permanent Representative of Guyana, for her service as President of the Council for the month of February. And I'm sure I can speak for all members of the Council in expressing deep appreciation to Ambassador Rodriguez-Baguette and her team for the great diplomatic skill with which they conducted the Council's business last month. The provisional agenda for this meeting is International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals. The agenda is adopted. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. The Council has before it the text of a statement by the President on behalf of the Council on the subject of today's meeting. I thank the Council members for their valuable contribution to this statement. In accordance with the understanding reached among the members of the Council, I shall take it that members of the Security Council agree to the statement, which will be issued as a document of the Security Council under the symbol S-PRSD-2024-1. If there is no other member state wish to take floor, the meeting is adjourned. The 9,562nd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is Situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with the Rules 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Islamic Republic of Iran, the Syrian Arab Republic, and Turkey to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Mr. Adediji Ebo, Director and Deputy to the High Representative, United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, to participate in the meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2024/1 111, letter dated 29 January 2024 from the Secretary General addressed to the President of the Security Council, and S/2024/192, letter dated 26 February 2024 from the Secretary General addressed to the President of the Security Council. I now give the floor to Mr. Adedeji Ebo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, I thank Council members for the opportunity to brief you once again on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2118 of 2013 on the elimination of the chemical weapons program of the Syrian Arab Republic. I am providing this briefing on behalf of the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, who is currently away from office. Since the last consideration of this matter by the Council, and consistent with established practice, the Office for Disarmament Affairs has been in regular contact with its counterparts in the OPCW Technical Secretariat on activities related to Resolution 2118. Mr. President, since the Council's previous meeting on this matter, the OPCW Declaration Assessment Team, or DAT, has continued its efforts to clarify all outstanding issues regarding the initial declaration and subsequent declarations submitted by the Syrian Arab Republic. As was reported at the last briefing to the Council on this matter, consultations between the DAT and the Syrian National Authority resumed in October 2023 after a gap of more than 2.5 years. I am pleased to further report that another round of consultations have taken place from 23rd January to 1st February 2024, which is the 26th round of consultations. I have been informed that during the 26th round of consultations, the DAT conducted technical meetings, revisited the status of outstanding issues, discussed ways to resolve these issues, and interviewed 7 persons who were involved in the Syrian chemical weapons program. The DAT also discussed the results of analysis of samples it collected between 2019 and 2023, with a focus on the unexpected presence of indicators of potentially undeclared activities involving research and development, production, storage, and/or the weaponization of unknown quantities of chemical weapons. Throughout the technical meetings, the DAT requested and explained to the Syrian National Authority the need for tangible, scientifically plausible, and verifiable explanations, amendments, and documents to resolve issues. I have been informed that the Syrian National Authority provided several amendments and explanations regarding research activities at some sites, taking into consideration the DAT's proposals and requests. In addition, following the consultations, on 15 February 2024, the Syrian Arab Republic submitted 2 note verbals regarding 3 outstanding issues and new explanations of the results of the analysis of samples collected by the DAT at one of the declared sites. I have been informed that the DAT is currently analyzing the information received and will report the results in due course. I encourage all parties involved to continue this renewed spirit of cooperation so that all outstanding issues regarding the initial and subsequent declarations submitted by the Syrian Arab Republic can be resolved. Mr. President, these outstanding issues include the complete declaration of activities at the Scientific Studies and Research Center, or SSRC, and the declaration of quantities of nerve agents produced at one chemical weapons production facility that was declared by the Syrian Arab Republic as never having been used to produce chemical weapons. With regard to inspections of the Barza and Jamraya facilities of the SSRC, I have been advised that the OPCW Technical Secretariat is planning the next round of inspections in 2024. However, as of the date of this month's report, the Syrian Arab Republic has yet to provide sufficient technical information or explanations that would enable the OPCW Technical Secretariat to close the issue related to the detection of a Schedule II chemical at the Barza facilities of the SSRC in November 2018. In addition, the OPCW Technical Secretariat has advised that it will continue its engagement with the Syrian National Authority concerning the origin and usage of a chemical of dual-use nature observed by the inspection team during the previous round of inspections in September 2022. The OPCW Technical Secretariat has also requested information regarding the unauthorized movement of the two cylinders related to the chemical weapon incident that took place in Douma on 7 April 2018, which were allegedly destroyed in an attack on a chemical weapons production facility. I have been informed that, as of the date of this report, the Technical Secretariat has not received a response to this request. Mr. President, the OPCW Technical Secretariat remains fully committed to implementing its mandate aimed at verifying the fulfillment of the Syrian Arab Republic's declaration obligations under the Convention, decisions by the OPCW policy organs, and Security Council resolutions. However, as has been previously emphasized, full cooperation by the Syrian Arab Republic with the OPCW Technical Secretariat is essential to closing all outstanding issues. Considering the identified gaps, inconsistencies, and discrepancies that remain unresolved, at this time, the OPCW Technical Secretariat assesses that the declaration submitted by the Syrian Arab Republic still cannot be considered accurate and complete in accordance with the Chemical Weapons Convention. I call upon the Syrian Arab Republic to continue its cooperation with the OPCW Technical Secretariat and respond with urgency to all of the Technical Secretariat's requests. Mr. President, since the last meeting of the Council, the OPCW Technical Fact-Finding Mission, FFM, and the Investigation and Identification Team, IIT, have both released reports under their respective mandates. On 22nd February 2024, the OPCW Technical Secretariat issued a report of the fact-finding mission regarding an incident of alleged use of toxic chemicals as a weapon in Al-Yarmouk on 22nd October 2017. The report concluded that the information obtained and analyzed in line with the FFM's mandate was not sufficient to provide reasonable grounds for the FFM to determine that toxic chemicals were used as a weapon in the reported incident. The FFM is currently preparing upcoming deployments and will report to the Executive Council on the results of its work in due course. The OPCW Technical Secretariat also issued a report on 22nd February 2024 entitled Fourth Report by the OPCW Investigation and Identification Team pursuant to paragraph 10 of decision CSS4/December 3 addressing the threat from chemical weapons use. Maria, Syrian Arab Republic, 1st September 2015. In this report, the IIT concluded, on the basis of all information obtained and its analysis, that there are reasonable grounds to believe that on 1st September 2015, during sustained attacks aimed at capturing the town of Maria, units of the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, otherwise known as ISIL, deployed sulfur mustard using one or more artillery guns. The IIT was able to identify a number of 4 individuals as perpetrators, and 2 further ISIL members were identified as the primary drivers of ISIL's chemical weapons program. The Secretary General has shared the IIT report with Council members as document S/2024/200. The IIT will continue its investigations and will issue further reports in due course. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, as the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs has emphasized on many occasions, any use of chemical weapons is unacceptable. I also echo the Secretary General's call to end impunity for all those who dare to use such weapons, especially against civilians. The absence of accountability for the use of chemical weapons continues to be a threat to international peace and security and a danger to us all. In closing, I urge the members of this Council to unite on this issue and show leadership in demonstrating that impunity in the use of chemical weapons will not be tolerated. The United Nations will continue to support all efforts to uphold the norm against chemical weapons and to relegate these dreadful weapons to history. The UN Office for Disarmament Affairs stands ready to provide whatever support and assistance it can. I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank Mr. Ebo for his briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. Russian Federation.
Спасибо, господин председатель.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Россия, как и ряд других коллег по Совету, неоднократно говорила о том, что рассматривать тематику сирийского химдосье раз в 3 месяца более чем достаточно. В этом сюжете уже давно не наблюдается никакого развития ситуации на земле. Это подтверждает и сегодняшний брифинг заместителя высокого представителя по вопросам разоружения Эбо. И сегодня на повестке дня находится очередной написанный под копирку ежемесячный доклад гендиректора ОСКО Фернандо Ариас. Из обращающих на себя внимание содержательных изменений в нем отражен лишь факт проведения 26-го раунда консультаций между сирийскими властями и миссией ОСКО по оценке первоначального объявления. Более того,
Moreover,
27 февраля
on the 27th of
Техсекретариат
February,
ОСХО
the
уведомил
OPCW
сирийское
Technical
руководство,
Secretariat notified the
что 3
Syrian
незакрытых
authorities
вопроса по
that 3
первоначальному объявлению
outstanding
Сирии
issues under
были
Syria's
урегулированы.
initial declaration had been
Дамаск
resolved.
оказывает все необходимое
Damascus is
содействие
providing all of the necessary
инспекциям,
assistance to the
проводимым
inspections
представителями
carried out by
организации.
the organization's
Конструктивное
representatives.
взаимодействие продолжается.
Constructive cooperation is continuing.
Полагаем, что наши сирийские
We
коллеги
feel that our
подробно об
Syrian
этом сегодня
colleagues
расскажут
will
сами.
probably tell us about that
Однако
today
не сомневаемся,
themselves. However,
что
we have no
данные
doubt
объективные факты
that these
ничуть не
objective facts
скорректируют
will do
тональность
nothing
сегодняшних
to alter
выступлений
the
западных
tone of
делегаций,
today's statements from
которые
Western
запрашивают эти
delegations
заседания с
who
единственной целью
request these meetings with
для
a single
отработки
aim
своих
to
стандартных
trot out
антисирийских
their
тезисов.
standard anti-Syrian arguments.
Техсекретариат
The
ОСХО
OPCW
по
Technical
западному заказу
Secretariat,
продолжает
upon the orders of
штамповать
the West,
политически
continues to
ангажированную
rubber stamp
псевдоаналитику.
politically biased pseudo-analyses.
Яркое тому
A
свидетельство
clear example, a clear
опубликованный на
evidence of
прошлой
that
неделе
is the
доклад миссии по
publication last
установлению
week
фактов
of
об
the report
инциденте
of the
в лагере
fact-finding
Ермук
mission
в
into the
пригороде
incident
Дамаска
in Yarmouk
22
camp
октября
in the suburbs
2017
of
года,
Damascus on the 27th of
а
October
также доклад
2017,
так
and also the
называемой группы
report
по
of the
расследованию и
so-called
идентификации об
investigation and
инциденте в населенном
identification
пункте
team
Морея 1
into the
сентября
incident in
2015
Morea
года.
on the 1st of September 2015.
Оба документа стали не
Both
только очередным
documents were
наглядным
not just another
подтверждением
clear
ангажированности руководства
confirmation of
Техсекретариата
the
ОСХО,
bias of the leadership
но
of the
и
OPCW
вновь
Technical
со всей
Secretariat, but
очевидностью
also, once again,
продемонстрировали
very clearly
неэффективность его работы.
demonstrated the ineffectiveness of its work.
В отношении доклада МУФ
As regards
факты и
the
хронологии событий
FFM
говорят
report,
сама за
the
себя.
facts and the timeline of events speak for themselves.
В первый раз представители миссии
The mission's
прибыли на место
representatives arrived
инцидента в
at
Ермуке в
the
декабре
scene of the
2017
incident in
года.
Yarmouk for the first time in December
Пробы,
2017,
отобранные при
and the
последующих
samples
поездках
taken during
МУФ в данный
subsequent
район, были
FFM
переданы в
visits to
лабораторию
that
ОСХО
area
лишь в
were given
январе
to the OPCW
2020
laboratory
года.
only in January
Результаты
2020.
их
The
анализа,
results of the
назначенными
analysis of
лабораториями,
those
были
samples by
получены
designated
Техсекретариатом в
laboratories were received by the
2021
Technical
году,
Secretariat in
а окончательный
2021,
доклад
but
МУФ
the FFM
государственные
final
участники
report
КЗХО получили и
only
вовсе
reached
спустя 3
CWC
года,
states
в
parties
феврале
3 years later
2024
in
года.
February 2024.
И это при том,
And that's
что,
even
согласно
though,
положениям
according to the
КЗХО,
provisions of the
окончательный
CWC,
доклад по
the
расследованию
final
случаев
report into the
предполагаемого
investigation of
применения
cases of the
химического
supposed
оружия,
use of chemical
включающий
weapons,
результаты анализа
including the
проб,
results of samples
должен быть
analysis,
представлен
is
государственным
supposed to
участникам
be
конвенции не
presented to
позднее,
states
чем через
parties to the
30 дней
convention no
после
later than
завершения
30
работы на
days
месте.
after the conclusion of work on the ground.
Сожалеем, что вынуждены
We
напоминать
regret
Техсекретариату
that we're forced to
ОСХО
remind the OPCW
основополагающие
Technical
принципы его
Secretariat the
деятельности.
fundamental principles of its actions.
Что же касается доклада
As
нелегитимной
regards the
игры,
report of the
то
illegitimate
останавливаться на его
IIT,
содержании мы не
we do
собираемся.
not intend to go into the
Выводы об
details of
ответственности
that.
ИГИЛ за
Conclusions
инцидент в
as to
Морея
the
ни для кого
responsibility of
откровением не
ISIL for the
стали.
incident in Morea were no
Совместный
surprise to
механизм
anyone.
ООН-ОСХО
The
по
UN
расследованию
OPCW
случаев
Joint
применения
Investigative
химоружия в Сирии,
Mechanism into
который
incidences of the
расследовал
use of chemical
аналогичный
weapons in
инцидент
Syria
в
that
данном
investigated
населенном
similar
пункте,
incidents in
еще в
that area
2016
back
году
in
пришел к такому же
2016 came to
заключению
the
по
same
акту
conclusion that it was an
химтерроризма,
act of chemical
осуществленному 21
terrorism
августа
carried out on the
2015
21st of
года.
August 2015.
В ходе подготовки своего документа
During
ГРИ в
preparations
очередной
of
раз
the
продемонстрировала
IIT document, it
недопустимые
once
методы
again
работы,
demonstrated
которые идут
unacceptable
вразрез с
working methods
предусмотренными
that run
КЗХО
counter
принципами
to the
расследования случаев
CWC's principles for the
предполагаемого
investigation
применения
of cases of the
химоружия.
supposed use of
Порядка
chemical
обеспечения
weapons,
сохранности
the
доказательств,
procedures for
работы со
preserving evidence,
свидетелями,
working with
обеспечение
witnesses,
выезда на место
and
инцидента и так
ensuring
далее.
that the place of incidents are
Впрочем,
visited and so
никакого
on.
удивления это давным-давно не
This
вызывает.
has long since
Западные
ceased
страны,
causing us any surprise.
продавливавшие создание
Western
ГРИ в
countries who
нарушение
forced through the
основополагающих
creation of the
принципов
IIT in
КЗХО,
violation of the fundamental
явно не
principles
были
of the
заинтересованы
CWC
в
clearly had no
объективной,
interest in an
беспристрастной и
objective,
качественной
impartial
работе
and
этой
good
структуры.
quality work being done by this
Единственная
entity.
цель ее
The only
функционирования
aim of
любой
its
ценой
work was
возложить
at
на
any
Сирию
cost to
ответственность за
blame
эпизоды
Syria
применения
for
химоружия
episodes of the use of
в
chemical
отсутствие
weapons
хоть
in the
сколь-либо
absence
убедительных
of
тому
any
доказательств.
convincing evidence whatsoever.
В этом контексте
In that context,
хотели бы повторить
we would like
принципиальную
to
позицию
repeat the
Российской
principal
Федерации.
position of the
Мы
Russian
не
Federation.
считаем, считаем
We
данную
believe
группу
that this
легитимной.
team is
Мы не
illegitimate.
считаем данную группу
We do not
легитимной.
believe that this team is
По этой
legitimate.
причине мы
For
принципиально
that
не намерены
reason,
ни
we
сотрудничать с
fundamentally have
ГРИ,
no intention to
не
cooperate
принимать к
with the
сведению ее
IIT, nor
изыскания.
take its findings into
Сирийское
account.
руководство
The
никаких
Syrian
подобных
leadership
обязательств тоже не несет.
also bears no such obligations.
Ну а что касается применения
As regards
химического
the
оружия
use of chemical
террористами, то не
weapons by
будем забывать
terrorists,
простой факт.
let's not forget a simple fact.
Западная
The
тройка еще в
Western Troika
2016
back in
году заблокировала все
2016
попытки
blocked
России
all
и Китая
attempts by Russia
расширить
and
мандат
China to
совместного
expand the
механизма
mandate of the
ООН-ОСХО
UN
на
OPCW
подконтрольную
joint
ИГИЛ территорию
mechanism
Ирака,
to ISIL
где,
controlled
согласно
areas of
докладам
Iraq,
Минита,
where, according to UNITAD reports, chemical weapons were being produced, including mustard gas, as well as preparations being made to use them. It's clear that the job of demonizing the Syrian authorities for the USA and their allies is much more of a priority than countering the risk of weapons of mass destruction being used by terrorist groups.
Господин председатель,
Mr. President,
упомянутые мной факты
the facts that I've
далеко не
mentioned
единственные
are far
примеры
from the only
зашкаливающей
examples
политизации
of the
деятельности
skyrocketing
ОСПО. Эта
politicization of the
организация давно
OPCW's
превратилась
work.
для западных
That
стран в
organization
площадку
has
для
long since
продвижения
been a
своих
platform for
узкокорыстных
Western
интересов.
countries to advance their
А
narrow
ее
mercantile
техсекретариат
interests,
–
and its
послушный
technical
инструмент для их
secretariat has
обслуживания.
become an obedient instrument to
Самоуправство
serve those
уже никого
interests.
не
This
удивляет.
high-handedness is no longer a surprise to
В ходе
anyone.
предыдущего заседания
During
по
the
сирийскому
previous
финдосье
meeting
в
on the
декабре
Syrian chemical file in
2023
December
года мы подробно
2023,
останавливались на принятых в ходе 28-й
addressed
сессии
in
государств
detail the
участников
adoption during
КЗКО в
the
Гааге
28th
рекомендаций о
session
введении
by
против Дамаска
CWC member
коллективных мер
states in The
в
Hague
целях
of
недопущения
recommendations to
поставок в
introduce
Сирию
collective measures
химикатов,
against Damascus
оборудования
to
и
prevent
технологий
the
двойного
supply of Syria
назначения.
to dual-use chemicals, equipment and
Данный шаг
technologies.
противоречит и
This step
КЗХО, и
contradicts the
Уставу ООН,
CWC and
не
the
говоря
UN
уже о
Charter without
рисках, которые он
mentioning
несет с
the
точки
risks
зрения
that
усугубления
it
и
brings
без
with
того
it in terms
тяжелой
of
гуманитарной
exacerbating an already
ситуации в
dire
Сирии.
humanitarian situation in
Однако
Syria.
думают ли об
However,
этом США и их союзники?
do the USA and
Вопрос
their
скорее
allies think about
риторический.
this? Well, it's a rhetorical question.
Порядок, основанный на правилах,
The
им куда нужнее,
rules-based
чем международное
order
право.
is much more important for them than international law is.
У нас нет никаких сомнений, что
We have no
сегодняшнее
doubts
заседание
that today's meeting
станет не более чем еще
will be
одним
nothing more
поводом для
than
западных
another
стран
reason for
поупражняться
Western
в
countries
антисирийской
to
риторике.
engage in anti-Syrian rhetoric.
Их спектаклем, разыгранным по хорошо заученным
Theirs
ролям.
is a show performed with
Впрочем,
well-rehearsed
обсуждение
roles.
сирийского
And the
химического
discussion
досье
of the Syrian
уже
chemical
напоминает
file
не столько
is
театральную
reminiscent not so
постановку,
much of a play,
сколько
really, so
исчерпавшую
much
себя
as a
мыльную оперу,
tired soap opera,
режиссеры которой
whose
безуспешно
directors
пытаются
are
поддерживать давно
unsuccessfully
утраченный
trying
интерес
to
публики
buoy up
надуманными
long-flagging
и
public
неестественными
interest with
поворотами сюжета.
absurd and unnatural plot twists.
Не удивимся, если для того, чтобы эта
We won't be
мыльная опера не
surprised if, in
сошла с
order to
экрана,
keep
мы
this soap
сегодня
opera on
услышим
the
и
air
очередные
today, we'll
антироссийские
hear
вбросы и
more
абсурдные
anti-Russian tales
обвинения.
and
Это
absurd
часть жанра,
accusations.
придуманного и
That's part and
продвигаемого
parcel of
Вашингтоном
the
и его
genre
сателлитами.
thought up and advanced by Washington and its
Подыгрывать
satellites.
им мы не намерены.
We don't intend to play into
На
their
фоне
hands.
стоящих перед Советом
Against the
Безопасности ООН
backdrop
задач,
of the
считаем
work
заседания,
before the
подобные
Security Council,
сегодняшнему,
we believe that
нерациональной тратой
meetings
времени и
such as
ресурсов.
today's are an irrational use or
Особенно
a
на
rational
фоне
waste of
нежелания
time
наших
and
западных
resources,
коллег
particularly in light of the
обсуждать
reluctance of
неудобную
our
для
Western
их
colleagues to discuss
ближневосточного
something
союзника
that's
тему
awkward for them Middle
израильских
East ally,
преступлений
that is
против
to say, the
мирного
subject
населения
of
Газы.
Israeli crimes against the civilian
Рассчитываем,
population of
что
Gaza.
заступившие на
We
вахту в Совет
trust that
Безопасности
the
в
delegations that
2024
took over
году
the watch in
делегации по итогам этого
2024,
заседания тоже
following
сделают
this
для себя
meeting,
необходимые
will
выводы на
also
этот
draw the
счет.
necessary conclusions about this.
Нам есть над чем вместе
We
работать
do
вместо
have work that we
проведения
need to do
бессмысленных
together
мероприятий для
instead of
отработки
holding
методички
pointless
узкой группы
meetings
стран.
to work through the playbook of a
Благодарю
small
вас.
group of countries. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr.
Permettez-moi tout
President.
d'abord de féliciter
Allow me
le
first of
Guyana
all to
pour leur excellent
congratulate
travail
Guyana
accompli
on
durant le mois
the
de
excellent
février
work accomplished
et de
during
vous
the month
assurer,
of
Monsieur le
February,
Président,
and to
ainsi que
assure
votre
you,
équipe,
Mr. President,
de
and
notre
your
plein soutien
team
pour votre
of our full
présidence.
support for your presidency.
Je remercie le haut représentant
I
adjoint
would
aux
like
affaires de
to
désarmement,
thank the Deputy
Monsieur
High Representative for
Adedji Ebo, pour sa
Disarmament Affairs,
présentation.
Mr. Adedeji Ebo, for his
Depuis plus d'une
presentation.
décennie, les
For
obligations
over a
découlant
decade,
de la Convention
obligations
sur
under
l'interdiction
the
des armes
Chemical Weapons
chimiques ont été
Convention
violées à
have
plusieurs
been
reprises en
repeatedly
Syrie.
violated in Syria.
Un an après la
A
publication
year
par l'Organisation pour
after
l'interdiction
the
des armes chimiques, OIAC,
OPCW
d'un rapport sur l'attaque
published a
meurtrière
report on
d'avril
the deadly
2018 à
attack,
Douma, de nouveaux faits
2018,
accablants
deadly
sont
April
encore
2018
portés à
attack in
l'attention
Douma.
de ce
Further
Conseil.
damning facts are brought to the attention
Le
of this
quatrième rapport
council.
de l'équipe d'enquête et d'identification de
The
l'OIAC, publié le
OPCW
22
Investigation
février,
and Identification
conclut qu'il
Team's
existe
fourth
des
report,
motifs
published on
raisonnables de
February
penser que des
22,
unités
concludes
de
that there are
Daesh
reasonable
ont
grounds
employé
to
du
believe
gaz
that
moutarde
Daesh
lors
units
d'une
used
série
mustard
d'attaques
gas in a
visant à
series of
capturer la
attacks
ville
to
de
capture
Maérea au nord du pays
the
au matin
northern
du
town
1er
of Maréa
septembre
on the morning of
2015.
September
Cette arme
1st,
chimique, dont
2015.
l'utilisation est
This
proscrite par
chemical
le droit
weapon,
international,
whose use is
inflige
prescribed
de
by
graves
international
brûlures
law,
chimiques aux yeux,
inflicts
à la
severe
peau
chemical
et aux
burns to
muqueuses.
eyes, skin, and
11
mucous
personnes au
membranes.
moins auraient
At
subi
least
de
11
tels
people are
symptômes
said to have
lors de
suffered
ces
such
attaques
symptoms
orchestrées,
in these
selon le rapport de
attacks
l'OIAC, par le
orchestrated
plus haut niveau
according
de
to
commandement
the
de Daesh.
OPCW report by Daesh's
La
highest
Suisse
level
fait
of
entièrement
command.
confiance à l'OIAC.
Switzerland
Elle
has
salue
full
le travail
confidence in the
méticuleux, le
OPCW. It welcomes the
professionnalisme et
meticulous work,
l'intégrité de
professionalism, and
l'équipe d'enquête et
integrity
d'identification.
of the IIT.
L'établissement des faits est crucial pour assurer la
Establishing the
reddition des
facts is
comptes
crucial
et
to
d'empêcher
ensuring
que de nouvelles attaques ne
accountability
se produisent.
and preventing future attacks.
Dans le cas présent, le fait
In
qu'un
this
acteur
case,
non étatique politique
The
qui a
fact
été
that a
désigné par
non-state
l'OIAC
actor has
souligne
been
la nécessité
designated by the
pour les États membres de la
OPCW
Convention sur
underlines
les
the
armes
need for
chimiques
member states
de prendre des
of the
mesures contre le transfert
CWC
des
to
biens
take action
destinés
against the
à la
transfer of
fabrication
chemical
d'armes
weapons
chimiques
goods
à des destinataires illégaux.
illegal
La Suisse a
recipients.
soutenu une décision allant dans
Switzerland
ce
supported
sens
a decision
lors
to
de la
this
dernière
effect
conférence des États parties
at
de
the
l'OIAC en
last
novembre
OPCW
2023.
Conference of States Parties in November
Par ailleurs, nous nous
2023.
félicitons de la récente tenue
We
de la
also welcome the
26e série de
recent
consultations entre l'équipe
26th round of
d'évaluation et de la
consultations
déclaration
between the
date de
OPCW's
l'OIAC
Declaration
et le gouvernement
Assessment
syrien.
Team and the Syrian
Nous appelons
government.
la Syrie à poursuivre
We
sa
call on Syria
coopération
to
avec
continue
l'OIAC.
its cooperation
La
with the
fourniture de réponses
OPCW,
concluantes
the provision
aux
of
points qui
conclusive
demeurent en
answers to the
suspens par
points that
rapport
remain
à la déclaration
unresolved
initiale de la
in
Syrie
relation to Syria's
sont l'une des
initial
conditions pour
declaration
qu'elle retrouve ses
is
droits
one
et
of the
privilèges
conditions
en
for
tant
it to
qu'État
regain
partie à la
its rights and
Convention sur les armes
privileges
chimiques.
as a state party to the Chemical Weapons
Fournir ces
Convention.
réponses sur la base
Providing
d'explications
these answers on the
vérifiables,
basis of
tangibles et
verifiable,
scientifiquement
tangible, and
plausibles
scientifically
constitue par
plausible
ailleurs une
explanations
obligation
also
vis-à-vis de ce
constitutes
Conseil.
an obligation to this Council.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
la Suisse
President,
condamne l'utilisation d'armes
Switzerland condemns the
chimiques et
use of
appelle
chemical
toutes les
weapons and
parties à
calls on
respecter
all
leurs
parties to
obligations
respect their
découlant du
obligations
droit international
under
humanitaire.
international humanitarian law.
Adoptée il y a 12 ans, la résolution
Adopted 12 years
2118
ago,
reflète la
Resolution
ferme conviction
2118
du Conseil
reflects
de
the firm
sécurité
conviction of the
et de
Security
la
Council
communauté
and
internationale
the international
que les
community
personnes
that
responsables de
those
l'utilisation
responsible
d'armes
for the
chimiques
use
en
of
Syrie
chemical
doivent
weapons in
répondre
Syria
de leurs actes.
must be held accountable.
Nous saluons à cet égard la
In this
coopération
respect, we
formelle entre
welcome the
l'OIAC
formal
et le
cooperation
mécanisme
between the
international
OPCW
impartial
and
et
the International
indépendant pour la Syrie.
Impartial and Independent
La
Mechanism for
lutte contre
Syria.
l'impunité
The
doit
fight against
contribuer à ce que
impunity
les armes
must
chimiques ne
contribute
soient
to
plus
ensuring
jamais
that chemical
utilisées
weapons are
par
never
qui que ce
used
soit,
again
à n'importe
by
quel
anyone
moment
at
et dans
any
n'importe
time
quelle
and in any
circonstance, en
circumstances
Syrie ou
in
ailleurs dans
Syria
le monde.
or
Je vous
elsewhere
remercie.
in the world. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Director Ebo, for your comprehensive briefing this morning. President, as we heard from Director Ebo this morning, the OPCW's Investigation and Identification Team released its fourth report on the 22nd of February. This latest report attributed responsibility to Daesh for a sulfur mustard attack in Mariah on the 1st of September 2015. We commend the continued professionalism and expertise of the IIT, and we condemn this confirmed use of chemical weapons in Syria by Daesh. The UN OPCW Joint Investigative Mechanism and the OPCW have now confirmed 9 uses of chemical weapons by the Assad regime and 4 by Daesh. Any use of chemical weapons by anyone, anywhere, at any time is unacceptable. And we regret that we cannot exclude the possibility of the further use of chemical weapons by the Assad regime or by non-state actors in Syria. President, Syria continues to fail to fulfill its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention and under this Council's Resolution 2118. As we have said many times in this chamber, the outstanding issues with Syria's initial chemical weapons declaration that Director Ebo covered this morning are not academic. They include the fate of several hundred tons of chemical warfare agents and thousands of chemical munitions. Instability in the region increases the risk of proliferation of chemical weapons to non-state actors. We need to remain focused on the risk that non-state actors develop, acquire, or use chemical weapons. All states should meet their obligations under Resolution 1540 to ensure that appropriate mechanisms are in place to counter the spread of weapons of mass destruction, as well as their means of delivery. President, Syria's obstructive behaviour and failure to declare in full its chemical weapons stockpile gives no grounds for confidence in Syria's handling of the chemicals and precursors that we know it retains. At the Chemical Weapons Convention Conference of State Parties in November 2023, state parties adopted a decision on addressing the threat from chemical weapons use and the threat of future use. Despite the spin that our Russian colleagues attempt to put on this decision, its function was very clear. It recommends that states parties review and enhance domestic measures on the transfer of toxic, dual-use chemicals and materials to Syria. And secondly, it calls on states parties to strengthen cooperation at the OPCW on tackling the threat of chemical weapons use by non-state actors. President, in the week in which Russia has called a Security Council meeting on the NATO intervention in Yugoslavia that took place 25 years ago, it's rich that our Russian colleagues say that these meetings are pointless. Because until Syria cooperates constructively and transparently with the OPCW, until Syria grants unfettered access to the OPCW Declaration Assessment Team, and until Syria fully declares and destroys its chemical weapons, this Council must remain focused on this clear and ongoing threat to international peace and security. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Malta.
Thank you, President, and I too thank Director Ebo for his informative briefing. At the outset, I congratulate you, President, on assuming the presidency of the Council. You can count on our full support during this time. We also thank Guyana for steering the work of the Council in a very effective and smooth manner in the month of February. President, Malta continues to support the holding of regular meetings on this file as mandated by Resolution 2118. This resolution, adopted unanimously, established that those responsible for the use of chemical weapons must be held accountable. This is not only a question of justice, but also one of prevention. Effective accountability is necessary to make sure that chemical weapons will never be used again. The use of chemical weapons is unacceptable and completely contrary to the legal norms and standards of the international community. In view of the recent issuance of the fourth IIT report on the use of chemical weapons in Syria, while expressing our continuous support for the IIT's key role in identifying perpetrators, it is crucial for the international community to reiterate its condemnation of chemical weapons use and to ensure that adequate measures are taken. We take note of the holding of the 26th round of consultations between the DAT and the Syrian national authorities last month. While this is a positive step, it is not enough to meet the obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention and Resolution 2118. In this regard, we look forward to the outcome of these engagements, including the assessment by the Secretariat of the responses of the Syrian Arab Republic regarding the samples collected by the DAT during its deployment in the country. The latest OPCW report clearly states that the declaration submitted by the Syrian Arab Republic still cannot be considered accurate and complete in accordance with the Convention and with Resolution 2111. This is regrettable. We urge the Syrian authorities to provide explanations and documents to resolve outstanding issues, including scientifically plausible and verifiable explanations regarding research and development at certain sites. The Syrian Arab Republic has used chemical weapons against its population at least 9 times, as demonstrated by independent OPCW and joint UN OPCW investigations. Yet, over 10 years after its accession to the Convention and the passing of Resolution 2118, it has failed to declare and destroy all its stockpiles. This is deeply troubling. Malta also condemns Daesh's reprehensible deployment of sulfur mustard during its siege to capture Marya in September 2015. This development of this unlawful chemical warfare agent and the delivery system by a terrorist group is concerning. In closing, President, we reiterate our strong condemnation for the use of chemical weapons by any actor under any circumstances. Furthermore, we reaffirm our full support for the OPCW and its technical teams. They carry out their mandate independently and impartially and in accordance with international standards. The Council should be united in recognizing this and refrain from casting any doubt on their work. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Malta for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
Mr. President, I wish to start by congratulating Japan on assuming the Council's presidency this month. I thank Guyana for steering the Council to a successful conclusion last month. China's position on chemical weapons-related issues is consistent. We sternly object to the use of chemical weapons by anyone under any circumstances for any purpose. We hope our world will soon become a chemical weapons-free world. I'd like to share two observations on the Syrian chemical weapons issue. First, dialogue and negotiation. This provides the only solution to this issue. We welcome the two recent rounds of technical consultations between the Syrian government and the OPCW and the positive progress achieved on outstanding issues related to the initial declaration. We look forward to continuous constructive cooperation between the Technical Secretariat and the government on the basis of mutual respect and cooperation on an equal footing to create conditions for the settlement of the Syrian chemical weapons issue. Second, upholding the authority of the Chemical Weapons Convention. This is a fundamental guarantee for the settlement of this issue. It is imperative that the OPCW strictly comply with the requirements of the CWC and its verification annex, adhere to the principles of procedural compliance, reliable evidence, and credible conclusions in investigating and pursuing accountability for the alleged use of chemical weapons. A scant few countries, without prior consultations, forced through a vote on and adoption of a new decision on the Syrian chemical weapons issue at the most recent Conference of the States Parties to the CWC. China finds this deeply concerning. We call on all parties to return to the tradition of consensus building to genuinely maintain the authority and effectiveness of the Convention. We also hope that the Director General and the Technical Secretariat can make tangible efforts to preserve the technical nature of the organization. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of China for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. Korea also joins in commending the successful role as presidency by Guyana and would like to express our full support and cooperation for the success of the presidency by Japan. I would also like to thank Mr. Adeji Ebo, Director and Deputy to the High Representative, for his very informative briefing on this issue. Mr. President, this Council has given its priority in realizing a world free of chemical weapons, and the Republic of Korea strongly supports the continuous efforts of the OPCW to achieve that end. In this regard, the Republic of Korea welcomes the publication of the fourth report by the Investigation and Identification Team, IIT, of the OPCW and commends its impartial and independent work. The Republic of Korea expressed grave concern over its findings that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the Daesh deployed a sulfur mustard, a chemical weapon, in artillery attacks against the town of Marea on September 1st, 2015. Against another case of possible use of chemical weapons in Syria, we reiterate our position that all those responsible for the use of chemical weapons must be held accountable. Mr. President, more than a decade has passed since Resolution 2118 was adopted unanimously in the wake of the use of chemical weapons in Ghouta, Syria. However, we are deeply concerned that the issue has shown limited advancement over the past years. Although we welcome the recent 26th round of consultations between DAT, Declaration Assessment Team, and Syria, these consultations must move beyond mere routine meetings and yield tangible outcomes. For this, Syria must take full responsibility and provide OPCW with scientifically plausible and verifiable explanation. 2 weeks ago, we received the latest report of the Director General of the OPCW on the progress in the elimination of chemical weapons in Syria, with explanation and amendments of the Syrian government on this issue. However, it is regrettable that there remains inconsistencies and discrepancies that needs to be addressed. Thus, we call on Syria to fully cooperate with the OPCW and to provide all the requested and the necessary information to the Secretariat. Mr. President, the use of chemical weapons can never be tolerated anywhere, at any time, and under any circumstances. In this light, the Security Council must act resolutely against any further use of chemical weapons by ensuring the full implementation of relevant Security Council resolutions, which include the complete destruction of chemical weapons in Syria. In this regard, the Republic of Korea reaffirms its steadfast commitment to holding the obligations under the Security Council resolutions as well as CWC, and stand ready to work with all Council members to address the Syrian issues. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Republic of Korea for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Gracias, señor presidente. Quisiera empezar por
Thank you,
expresar
President.
nuestra
I'd like
felicitación a la
to
delegación de Guyana por el
begin
excelente
by
trabajo
congratulating
realizado durante el mes de
Guyana
febrero
for
de este año y
excellently
decirle
guiding
también,
our work in February.
presidente, a usted y a su delegación que
And
cuenta
I
con el
wish
apoyo
you
del
and your
Ecuador para el
delegation every
desarrollo de sus
success, and we
actividades
assure you
durante este mes
of
de
our
mayo.
support as you carry out the work
Mi
this
delegación
month.
agradece la
My
exposición
delegation is
informativa del
grateful for
señor
the
Adede
briefing
Diego,
provided by Mr.
director
Adedeji
y
Ebo,
adjunto de la,
Director and Deputy
de la alta
High
representante para
Representative
asuntos de
for
desarme.
Disarmament Affairs.
El Ecuador
Ecuador
reconoce los esfuerzos de la
recognizes the
Organización para la
efforts
Prohibición de
of
las
the
Armas
Organization
Químicas
for the
y
Prohibition
en
of
esa
Chemical
línea
Weapons,
saludo la
and
ejecución de la
we
26ª
welcome the
ronda de
completion of the
consultas entre el
26th
equipo de
round of
evaluación de la declaración de la
consultations
Secretaría
between the
Técnica de la OPAC
OPCW Technical
y la Autoridad
Secretariat
Nacional Siria
Declaration
mantenidas del
Assessment Team
23 de enero
and the
al 1
Syrian
de
National
febrero del
Authorities
2024.
held on from the 23rd of
Este tipo
January
de
to the 1st of
cooperación
February
es el mejor
2024.
camino para la
This type
obtención
of
de
cooperation
resultados
is the
positivos,
best way to achieve
rendición de
positive
cuentas
results,
y el
ensure
adecuado
accountability,
cumplimiento de las
and proper
obligaciones bajo el
compliance
derecho
with
internacional
obligations under
y las
international
resoluciones
law
pertinentes del
and
Consejo de
relevant
Seguridad
Security Council
en el expediente de las
resolutions
armas químicas de la
in the
República
Syrian
Árabe
Arab
de Siria.
Republic chemical
Por eso,
weapons file. For that
aliento a las
reason,
autoridades
I
sirias a seguir
encourage Syrian
colaborando de manera
authorities to
abierta y
continue to
transparente
cooperate
bajo
openly
un
and
marco de entendimiento
transparently
común
within a
por
common
medio del diálogo.
understanding and through dialogue.
Señor presidente,
Mr.
preocupan las
President,
conclusiones
we are
del cuarto
concerned
informe
by
del
the
Grupo de
conclusions
Investigación e
of the
Identificación de la OPAC, en el que se
OPCW-ITT fourth
establece que existen
report,
motivos
which
suficientes
determined that there
para
are
asegurar que el
sufficient
Estado
grounds to
Islámico en
believe
Irak
that the
y el
Islamic State
Levante
in Iraq and the Levant
utilizó agentes
used
mostaza durante los ataques
mustard
para la
agents
captura de la ciudad de
during
Marea
the
el 1 de
attacks
septiembre del
to
2015.
capture the city of Marea on the
Este
1st
hecho
of
es
September
condenable
2015.
y no debe haber
This is a
impunidad para
reprehensible
sus
act,
responsables.
and there should be no
Más aún,
impunity for those
los actos de
responsible.
terrorismo
Moreover,
en
acts
todas
of
sus
terrorism
formas
in all
y
their forms,
manifestaciones junto con la
together
proliferación de las
with the
armas de destrucción en
proliferation of
masa
weapons of mass
constituyen
destruction,
amenaza a la paz y
are
seguridad
threats to
internacionales.
international peace and security.
Como lo señala la resolución
Pursuant
1540
to
adoptada
Resolution
en 2004,
1540 adopted
los
in
estados deben
2004,
adoptar y
states
aplicar
must
los
adopt
medios
and apply
necesarios para
necessary
impedir que
measures
los
to
actores no
keep
estatales
non-state
accedan,
actors from
fabriquen,
acquiring,
posean, desarrollen,
manufacturing,
transporten,
possessing,
transfieran o
developing,
usen armas de
transporting,
destrucción
transferring, or
masiva
using
y sus
weapons of
sistemas
mass
vectores,
destruction
en
and their
particular
delivery
con fines del
systems, in
terrorismo.
particular for
La
the
amenaza de
purpose
los
of
agentes no
terrorism.
estatales,
Threats of
incluidos los que
non-state
tienen
agents,
fines
including
terroristas,
those
que
with
adquieren
terrorist
y
goals
utilizan
who
armas de destrucción
acquire and
masiva,
use weapons
no
of mass
reconocen
destruction,
fronteras.
do not
Por
recognize
ello,
any borders,
reitero la
and therefore I
necesidad de
reiterate the
cumplir
need
todas las
for
obligaciones establecidas
compliance
en la
with
resolución
all
1540.
obligations established in Resolution
Distinguidos colegas,
1540.
para
Distinguished
concluir,
colleagues, in
al reconocer la
conclusion,
labor de la OPAC
in
y la
recognizing
integridad,
the work of the
profesionalidad,
OPCW and the
imparcialidad,
integrity,
objetividad e
professionalism,
independencia de sus equipos
impartiality,
técnicos,
objectivity,
el
independence
Ecuador
of its
reitera
technical
una vez
teams,
más su rechazo a
Ecuador
la
once
producción y
again
almacenamiento de armas
reiterates its
químicas
rejection
y condena
of the
en los
production
términos más
and
enérgicos
stockpiling
su
of
uso por
chemical
quien sea,
weapons, and we condemn
contra
in the
cualquier
strongest
persona,
terms their
en
use
cualquier lugar
by
y bajo
anyone,
cualquier
against
circunstancia.
anyone, anywhere,
Muchas
under
gracias.
any circumstances. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Mozambique.
Mr. President, I have the honor to deliver this joint statement on behalf of the A3+, namely Algeria, Guyana, Sierra Leone, and my own country, Mozambique. On behalf of the A3, we wish to convey our warmest congratulations to you, Mr. President, and to your country, Japan, for assuming the presidency of the Security Council for the month of March. We pledge our full support in the discharge of your heavy responsibilities. We pay tribute to Her Excellency Ambassador Caroline Rodriguez Birket, and the entire Team Guyana for the outstanding presidency of the Council in February. We thank Mr. Abede Jebo, Director and Deputy to the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs for his briefing. We welcome the participation in this meeting of the representatives of the Syrian Arab Republic, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and Turkey. Mr. President, we take note of the contents of the 125th monthly report of the OPCW covering the period from 24th January to 23rd February 2024. We also acknowledge the submission of the 123rd monthly report dated the 15th February 2024 on progress achieved by the Syrian Arab Republic regarding the destruction of its chemical weapons. DA3 encouraged the Secretariat to continue its effort to clarify the Syrian Arab Republic's declarations by addressing the identified gaps, inconsistencies, and discrepancies that remain unresolved. Additionally, we urge the Syrian Arab Republic to continue its cooperation by submitting the relevant explanations, documents, and amendments to the outstanding issues in accordance with the Chemical Weapons Convention. We note with appreciation the collaboration of the Syrian Arab Republic with the Secretariat, particularly for allowing the conduct of the 26th round of consultations in Damascus in January 2024, and for submitting explanations of the results of the analysis of samples collected by the declaration assessment at one of the declared sites. Mr. President, notwithstanding the recent encouraging developments, the A3+ remains concerned over the slow pace of progress in effort to close the Syrian Arab Republic's chemical weapons program. We reiterate our firm belief that the use of chemical weapons anywhere by anyone and under any circumstances must be condemned. Impunity for such a heinous crime under international law is not acceptable. The recent findings in the report of the OPCW investigation and the identification team indicate that there are reasonable grounds to believe that on 1st September 2015, during sustained attacks aimed at capturing the town of Maria, ISIL units deployed sulfur mustard using one or more artillery guns. These findings suggest that henceforth the Syrian chemical weapons program will be seen in a different perspective. DA3 expresses their grave concern over threats posed by acts of terrorism using chemical weapons in light of the deployment of such weapons by ISIL. In this regard, we urge the focal points of the two sides to expedite arrangements for a high-level meeting aimed at addressing the Syrian chemical weapons file based on the new findings from Maria. This would foster the needed momentum for the conclusive resolution on the outstanding issues and to ultimately speed up the process. The A3 Plus calls upon the Syrian Arab Republic to continue its collaboration with the OPCW obligations in line with Security Council Resolution 2118 or 2013 and the CWC to help in resolving protracted issues, to declare all chemical weapons and their production facilities in its possession, to organize the next round of consultations with the Declaration Assessment Team, and to solve the outstanding issues in order to definitely close this file. So, President, the A3 Plus remains committed to the imperative against the use of chemical weapons and all efforts aimed at prohibiting their development, production, acquisition, stockpiling, retention, transfer, or use. We reaffirm our continued support for the Security Council Resolution 2118. We wish to underscore the need for a definite closure of the issues pertaining to the Syrian chemical weapons program. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Mozambique for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me, at the outset, congratulate you and Japan on assuming the presidency of the Council, and let me assure our full support during your presidency. Let me also thank Guyana for conducting a very calm presidency of the month of February. I would like to thank Deputy to the High Representative Ebo for his briefing. Mr. President, let me begin with a general message. The use of chemical weapons in the 21st century is unacceptable. To us, it feels almost anachronistic. Chemical weapons were used on the territory of Slovenia during the World War I, and we were unfortunately able to learn early on about their abhorrent effects. More concretely, the long-standing prohibition of chemical weapons has been challenged in recent years by their repeated use in the Syrian Arab Republic and elsewhere. Slovenia condemns in the strongest possible terms any use of chemical weapons by anyone. Such acts have devastating impacts on civilians and the environment, constitute a serious violation of international law, and those responsible for the use of the weapons should be held accountable. In this respect, Slovenia welcomes the work of the OPCW fact-finding mission in Syria and the investigation and identification team. We are pleased with the diligent work of the IIT, which most recently brought clarity to the circumstances surrounding chemical weapons used by ISIL forces in the Syrian town of Maria in September 2015. Mr. President, we remain concerned by the many unanswered questions regarding chemical weapons in Syria. There are reasonable grounds to believe that despite verified destruction of declared chemical weapons stockpiles and production facilities, Syria has retained part of its chemical weapons program in violation of the Chemical Weapons Convention. What is more, international investigation bodies have confirmed the use of chemical weapons by Syrian forces in 9 instances since Syria's accession to the Convention. This is unacceptable. We call on Syria to comply with its obligations under the Convention, declare all its chemical weapons production and research activities, destroy any remaining secret caches, and fully cooperate with the OPCW, including by providing unfettered access to sites, documents, and people needed to resolve all outstanding issues. Mr. President, I cannot emphasize enough the need to prevent the emergence of the chemical weapons, and the attention of the Security Council is only logical. Slovenia believes only a multilateral approach with the CWC, OPCW, and international humanitarian law at its center can pave the way to a world free of chemical weapons. Mr. President, we take note of the position of the Russian Federation. The Security Council should use wisely its time and resources. Since Russian Federation doesn't want to be labeled as having double standards, we will remind them of this position as needed. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me first congratulate you on assuming the presidency and assure you of the full cooperation of my delegation. And thank you, Deputy Ibo, for your briefing and continued attention to this important issue. For 10 years, the United States, alongside most of the international community, has called out the Assad regime's repeated and ongoing violation of the Chemical Weapons Convention and Resolution 2118. We have condemned the regime's multiple, independently confirmed uses of chemical weapons against the Syrian people, and the regime's failure to fully declare and destroy its chemical weapons and production facilities. We will continue to pursue accountability for all who use chemical weapons. Recent reports by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons are alarming. I urge all members of this Council to read the September 2023 OPCW report entitled Accession of the Syrian Arab Republic to the CWC, 10 Years On. This document provides a factual accounting of Syria's record of noncompliance with the CWC. The Director General's report on progress in the elimination of the Syrian CW program is equally concerning. Director General Arias's report comes on the heels of the decision taken by the OPCW Conference of the States Parties this past fall that for the first time invokes Article 12, Paragraph 3 of the CWC and recommends that state parties take certain, quote, collective measures, unquote, to prevent the transfer to Syria of dual-use chemicals and equipment. States parties must act to prevent such items from falling into the hands of the Assad regime and non-state actors, particularly terrorist groups. Colleagues, the United States fully supports robust implementation of this decision. We will be working toward that end and fully support the Security Council meeting this year to discuss its implementation. As is well documented in these OPCW reports, the Syrian regime continues to obfuscate and impede the work of the OPCW and its various technical teams that seek to fully engage with Syria in carrying out their mandates. Rather than address discrepancies in its own declaration or providing the OPCW with full substantive cooperation, Syria continues to delay and deflect, and Syria's friends are politicizing the technical work of the organization. The recent findings by the OPCW Declaration Assessment Team heighten our concern that the Syrian regime retains a residual chemical weapons capability. We note with equal concern the February 22 report by the OPCW's Investigation and Identification Team, which concluded that there are reasonable grounds to believe that on September 1, 2015, during sustained attacks aimed at capturing the town of Maria, Daesh terrorists deployed sulfur mustard. The report finds that at least 11 individuals encountered liquid substances from projectiles fired by Daesh and experienced symptoms consistent with exposure to sulfur mustard. These findings are in line with the United States' own assessment of the attack. In finding Daesh ISIL responsible for these attacks, this report demonstrates that the IIT reports where the facts lead them, notwithstanding baseless claims of bias by members of this council and the Syrian regime. As the IIT itself noted, it applied the same methodologies and standards for this investigation as it has in all of its prior reports. We commend the independent, impartial, and expert work of the OPCW staff and condemn the use of chemical weapons anywhere, by anyone, under any circumstances. The report further illustrates the need for the OPCW to retain the IIT's unique investigative expertise, which plays a crucial role in upholding the global norm against the use of chemical weapons. The United States encourages the international community to strengthen cooperation in preventing the acquisition of chemical weapons by terrorists and make clear that there can be no impunity for the use of chemical weapons by anyone. Colleagues, the threat posed to Syrians and the international community by Syria's continuing noncompliance with the CWC and Council resolutions is alarming. We welcome the ongoing work of the OPCW as well as its report. We are committed to work with this Council in other multilateral fora and with partner countries to address this threat and ensure the Assad regime never again terrorizes the people of Syria with chemical weapons. Finally, Mr. President, let me say a few words in response to attacks that have been made by some on the professionalism and rigor of the investigative teams. We commend the OPCW's investigations of chemical weapons use in Syria. We continue to be impressed by the rigor of the OPCW brings to each of its investigative efforts, meticulously collecting and analyzing evidence from a multitude of sources to reach irrefutable conclusions. This important work is necessary so that those responsible for these attacks can be held to account. There can be no, repeat, no, impunity for chemical weapons use. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
je remercie Monsieur Ebo pour son exposé.
For his briefing.
La prolifération des armes chimiques
The
constitue
proliferation
une
of
menace
chemical
pour la paix
weapons
et la
constitutes a
sécurité
threat to
internationale.
international peace and
Celle-ci
security
continue de nécessiter
that
une
continues
attention
to
vigilante de ce
require
Conseil.
vigilance on the part of
Nous
this
avons assisté
Council.
au cours des 10 dernières
In the
années à
last
une
10 years,
réémergence
we have witnessed a
préoccupante
worrying
de l'emploi d'armes
re-emergence of the
chimiques,
use of chemical
notamment en Syrie.
weapons,
La
particularly in
France soutient
Syria.
résolument les travaux
France
menés par
determinedly
l'Organisation pour
supports the work
l'interdiction
of
des
the
armes chimiques
Organization for the
pour œuvrer
Prohibition of
à
Chemical
l'élimination de
Weapons
ces armes,
to work to eliminate
documenter les cas
these
d'emploi,
arms, to
en
document cases
identifier
of
les
them being
auteurs et
used, to
permettre une
identify the
reddition
perpetrators
des
and to
comptes.
allow for accountability.
La France salue le dernier rapport de
France
l'équipe
welcomes
d'enquête
the
et
latest report of
d'identification
the
de l'OIAC
investigation
qui
and
conclut à la
identification
responsabilité
team
de Daesh
of the
dans l'attaque
OPCW, which
chimique
concludes that Daesh was
perpétrée à
responsible for
Marea
the chemical
le 1er
attack
septembre
perpetrated in
2015.
Marea on the 1st of
Le gaz
September
moutarde dispersé
2015.
ce jour-là a
Mustard
affecté
gas
au
dispersed
moins
on that
11
day
personnes.
affected at
Ce
least
rapport,
11 people.
issu d'un travail d'enquête
That report,
considérable
the
mené de
result
façon
of considerable
indépendante et
investigative work
impartiale,
conducted
établit pour la
independently
première
and
fois
impartially,
l'emploi
for the
d'armes
first time
chimiques par un
establishes
acteur
the
non
use of
étatique.
chemical weapons by a
La
non-state
France
actor.
continuera de soutenir
France will
l'OIAC
continue to
dans ses
support
efforts
the
pour
OPCW
lutter
in its
contre le
efforts to
terrorisme
combat
chimique.
chemical
À ce
terrorism.
titre, l'existence d'un
In
cadre
this
de
regard,
discussion sur
the
le terrorisme
existence
chimique au
of
sein
a
de
framework for
l'OIAC
discussions
constitue
on
une plateforme
chemical
utile pour
terrorism within
préparer
the
la réponse de tous les États
OPCW is a
à ce genre
useful
d'attaque.
platform to prepare
La
the
France
response of all
réaffirme
states
également
to
son
this sort of
soutien à la
attack.
résolution
France also
1540 du
reaffirms
Conseil
its
de
support
sécurité dont
for
nous
Security
fêterons
Council Resolution
le 20e anniversaire le
1540,
mois
the 20th
prochain.
anniversary of which we
Cette
will mark
résolution
next
est un
month.
instrument
This
essentiel pour
resolution
prévenir
is an
l'accès des
essential
acteurs non
instrument for
étatiques
preventing
aux armes de
non-state
destruction
actors from
massive.
getting access to
La France
weapons of
condamne
mass
tout
destruction.
emploi d'armes
France
chimiques
condemns
à
any
tout
use
moment,
of chemical
en tout
weapons,
lieu, par
whenever,
quiconque et en
wherever,
toutes
by
circonstances,
whomever, and
que
in
ces
any
auteurs soient des groupes
circumstances,
terroristes ou des
be the
États qui
perpetrators
violent leurs
terrorist
engagements
groups or
internationaux.
states violating
À
international
cet égard,
commitments.
rappelons que les trois
In this
rapports
regard, let's
précédents
remember
de
that the
l'équipe
three
d'enquête
previous reports of the
avaient
investigative
démontré
team
la responsabilité du
demonstrated
régime
the
syrien
responsibility of
dans
the
des
Syrian
attaques
regime
chimiques commises à
for chemical
Latamné
attacks
en
committed in
2017,
Latamné in
à Sarakib et à
2017,
Douma en
Sarakib and in
2018.
Douma in
Le régime
2018.
syrien a utilisé des armes
The Syrian
chimiques
regime
contre sa
has
propre
used chemical
population,
weapons against its
y
own
compris
population,
après son adhésion
including
à la Convention
after
sur
acceding to
l'interdiction
the
de ces armes en
Convention on the
2013
prohibition of those weapons
et
in
après
2013,
l'adoption à
and following the
l'unanimité par
unanimous
ce
adoption
Conseil
by
de
this
la
Council
résolution
of Resolution
2118.
2118.
Le régime syrien aurait depuis dû renoncer à
Since then,
l'usage
the
de ces
Syrian
armes
regime should
et
have renounced the
procédé
use of
à la
these
destruction
weapons and
totale de ses stocks.
proceeded to the total destruction of its
La Syrie
stocks.
n'a pas répondu aux
Syria
questions
has
qui
not
demeurent
answered
Sur l'état
the
de ces stocks
outstanding
d'armes chimiques,
questions
le directeur
over
général de
its
l'OIAC
chemical weapons
révèle une fois de
stocks. The
plus dans son
OPCW
dernier
Director
rapport que
General
la
notes once
déclaration
again
des
in his
autorités
latest
syriennes
report
ne
that
peut
the
toujours
declaration
pas
of the
être
Syrian
considérée comme
authorities still
exacte et
cannot be
complète
considered
au
as
regard
exact
des
and
exigences
complete
de la
under
Convention.
the requirements of the
La France
Convention.
appelle de nouveau la
France
Syrie
once
à
again calls
coopérer
upon
pleinement
Syria to
avec
fully
l'OIAC
cooperate with the
et à se
OPCW
conformer à
and
ses
to
obligations
comply
au
with
titre
its
de la Convention.
obligations under the
C'est la
Convention.
condition
This is
pour
the
qu'elle
condition
recouvre
for it
ses droits et
to
privilèges
recover
d'État
its
partie
rights and
qui ont été
privileges as a state
suspendus en
party that was
2021.
suspended in
La France
2021.
demeure pleinement
France
engagée
remains
dans la
fully
lutte pour
committed
l'élimination
to
complète
the
des armes
fight
chimiques.
for the
Elle
complete elimination
continuera
of
de
chemical
se
weapons.
mobiliser
We
avec
will
ses
continue to
partenaires et avec
mobilize together with our
l'OIAC
partners
pour
and
que
the
l'emploi de ces
OPCW
armes
to ensure
inhumaines
that the use of
ne
these
reste pas
inhumane weapons
impuni.
does not
Je
go
vous
unpunished.
remercie.
Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for their statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Japan. I thank Mr. Ebo for his informative briefing. I would like to begin by reiterating Japan's principles on this chemical weapons file. Any use of chemical weapons, anywhere, at any time, by anyone, under any circumstances, is unacceptable, and those responsible for their use must be held accountable. To this end, we commend and strongly support the professional, impartial, and independent work of the OPCW, and reaffirm the importance of the ongoing work of the fact-finding mission, FFM, and the investigation and the identification team, IIT, in establishing the truth regarding the alleged instances of chemical weapons use and identifying the perpetrators. The latest report of the IIT concluded that there are reasonable grounds to believe that ISIL perpetrated the attacks of chemical weapons in Maria in September 2015. Japan condemns such use of chemical weapons as concluded by the report. Together with the cases in which the IIT identified the perpetrators in their 3 previous reports, it is our shared responsibility to hold accountable those who have used chemical weapons and bring justice to the victims. We strongly oppose any attempt to undermine the invaluable work of the IIT. Regarding the most recent OPCW monthly report, Japan deeply regrets the report once again confirmed that declaration submitted by Syrian Arab Republic still cannot be considered accurate and complete, violating its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention and UN Security Council Resolution 2118. While we take note of the outcome of the recent rounds of consultation, Syria must continue its engagement and cooperation in good faith with the OPCW Technical Secretariat and its Declaration Assessment Team, DAT. We also urge Syria to provide tangible, scientifically plausible, and verifiable explanations and documents to resolve all outstanding issues as requested by the DAT in the 26th round of consultation. Preventing the recurrence of the use of chemical weapons in Syria must continue to be this Council's priority. We call upon all Council members to join us in urging the Syrian government to fully comply with its obligation under the CWC and Security Council Resolution 2118 and eliminate its entire chemical weapons program. Japan believes the Council should remain seized regularly on this matter. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr.
سيد
President.
الرئيس أود
Mr.
بداية
President,
أن
at the
أهنئكم
outset, I would like
على
to
توليكم
congratulate
رئاسة
you
المجلس
on
لهذا الشهر.
assuming the presidency of the Council
كما
for
أتوجه
this month.
بالشكر
I would
لسلفكم
also like
جيانا
to thank your predecessor,
على إدارتها الناجحة
Guyana,
لأعمال
for the
المجلس
successful
خلال الشهر الماضي.
conduct of the work of the Council over the
سيد
past
الرئيس،
month.
مجددا
Mr. President,
ينعقد مجلس
once
الأمن
again, The Security
لمناقشة
Council
ما
is
سمي
meeting
بالملف
to
الكيميائي
discuss what is
للجمهورية
called
العربية
the
السورية.
chemical file of the Syrian Arab
وتبرز
Republic.
جلسة اليوم مرة
Today's
أخرى
session once
مسألتين
again
أساسيتين
highlights
وهما:
two fundamental
أولاً
issues. First,
إمعان الدول الغربية
the
الثلاث
persistence of the three
دائمة العضوية
permanent Western
في نهجها
member
القائم على
states
توظيف هذا
approach
الملف
that uses
كأداة
this file
سياسية
as a
للضغط على
political
الحكومة
tool to
السورية.
bring pressure to bear on the Syrian
ثانياً
government. Second,
ازدواجية
the
المعايير
double standards
التي يجسدها التغاضي عن التهديد
by turning
الفعلي
a blind
والحقيقي
eye to the
لمنطقة الشرق
actual
الأوسط
and real threat facing the
والناجم عن
Middle East
ترسانة
region. The real
كيان
threat
الاحتلال
emanates
الإسرائيلي
from the
من
Israeli
أسلحة
occupation
الدمار الشامل
entity's arsenal of weapons
النووية
of mass destruction,
والكيميائية
be it nuclear,
والبيولوجية،
chemical or
لا سيما
biological.
وأننا شهدنا مؤخرا
This was especially
تهديدات
evident
خطيرة
recently through the
باستخدام
serious
الأسلحة
threats to
النووية
use nuclear
ضد الشعب
weapons
الفلسطيني،
against the Palestinian
كما
people.
شهدنا أيضا
We have also
استخدامات
witnessed
موثقة لأسلحة
documented uses
محظورة
of prohibited
بما فيها
weapons,
الفوسفور الأبيض
including white
من قبل
phosphorus,
قوات
by
الاحتلال
the Israeli
الإسرائيلي
occupation
في
forces
الأراضي
in
الفلسطينية
the
المحتلة
occupied
وجنوب
Palestinian
لبنان.
territories in southern Lebanon.
السيد الرئيس،
Mr. President,
تواصل الجمهورية العربية
the
السورية
Syrian Arab
تعاونها
Republic
مع الأمانة
continues to
الفنية
cooperate
لمنظمة
with the
حظر
Technical
الأسلحة الكيميائية
Secretariat of the Organization
اتساقا
for
مع
the
نهجها
Prohibition of
الذي
Chemical
بدأته
Weapons
منذ
in line with
اتخاذها
its
لقرارها
approach
الاستراتيجي
adopted
والطوعي
in
في العام
2013.
2013
Then
بالتخلي
it
عن
took a
برنامجها
strategic and
الكيميائي
voluntary decision
والانضمام
to abandon its
لاتفاقية
chemical
الأسلحة
program
الكيميائية.
and
في هذا
accede
السياق
to the Chemical
أود أن
Weapons
أشير إلى
Convention.
النقاط
In this
التالية.
context, I would like to
أولاً،
point to the following.
قدمت اللجنة الوطنية
First,
السورية
the Syrian
تقريريها
National
الشهريين
Authority submitted its
رقم
monthly
122
reports number
123
122 and
واللذين
123
يغطيان الأنشطة
which
التي
cover
تم
the
إجراؤها في
activities carried
سوريا
out in
خلال
Syria
الفترة
during the
الأخيرة.
recent period.
ثانياً،
Second,
يسرت اللجنة
the
الوطنية
Syrian
السورية
National Authority
عقد جولة
facilitated
المشاورات
the
السادسة والعشرين
26th round of
لفريق تقييم
consultations
الإعلان،
for the Declaration Assessment
وقدمت
Team.
كل التسهيلات
It
لإنجاح مهمة
provided all
الفريق،
facilities to ensure the success
كما
of the
حرصت
team's mission.
على إحراز
The
تقدم
authority was
ملموس
keen to make
لإغلاق عدد
tangible
من
progress
المسائل،
to resolve
حيث تم
several issues.
الاتفاق على جملة من
A number
الخطوات
of steps were
التي
agreed
نفذتها
upon
سوريا
and
انطلاقا من
implemented by
إيمانها
Syria,
بأهمية أن تكون
proceeding
جولات
from its
المشاورات
belief in the
موضوعية
importance of
وإيجابية.
objective and positive rounds of
ثالثا،
consultations.
بتاريخ
Third,
27
on
شباط
February
فبراير
27,
2024
2024,
أعلمت الأمانة الفنية
the
لمنظمة
Technical
حظر الأسلحة
Secretariat of the
الكيميائية
OPCW
اللجنة الوطنية
informed
السورية
the Syrian National
بأنه
Authority
قد تم
that
إغلاق
three
3 مسائل
outstanding
معلقة
issues related to the
تتعلق
Syrian
بالإعلان
initial
الأولي السوري،
declaration had been
وأن هناك مسائل
resolved,
أخرى
and that
يمكن
there
التوصل
were other
لحلها
issues that could be
وأصبح
resolved, and
إغلاقها
their
وشيكا.
closure was imminent.
إن هذا يؤكد
This
صحة
confirms
دعوتنا
the
المستمرة
validity of our
لبعض الدول
continued call to
بالتوقف
some
عن
countries
كيل
to
الاتهامات
stop
الباطلة
making false
وعدم استباق
accusations
نتائج
or
المشاورات.
prejudging the results of the
رابعاً،
consultations. Fourth,
يسرت اللجنة الوطنية
the Syrian
السورية
National Authority
عقد جولة التفتيش
facilitated the
العاشرة
10th round
لمركز
of
الدراسات
inspection
والبحوث
by the
العلمية
Scientific Studies and
التي
Research
جرت في
Center,
كانون
which took
الأول
place
الماضي.
last
وسأنقل لكم
December.
هنا
In
ما
this
ورد في
vein,
تقارير الأمانة
I
الفنية
will quote
عن جولة التفتيش
what was
تلك.
stated in the Technical
وأقتبس:
Secretary's reports on that
تمكن
inspection
فريق
round.
التفتيش من
I quote,
تنفيذ
The
الأهداف
inspection team
الموكلة
was
إليه،
able to implement the objectives
وخلال جولة
entrusted
التفتيش
during
العاشرة
the 10th round of
لم
inspection.
يلاحظ الفريق
The
أي
inspection
أنشطة
team did not
تتعارض مع
observe any
التزامات الدولة
activities
الطرف
inconsistent with the
موضع التفتيش،
obligations of the inspected
سواء
state party
بموجب الاتفاقية أو بموجب
under
أي
the
قرارات
CWC
صادرة
or under
عن
any
أجهزة صنع
decisions
القرارات
issued by the
في منظمة
policymaking
حظر
organs
الأسلحة
of the
الكيميائية
OPCW
وقرارات مجلس
and
الأمن ذات
relevant
الصلة.
Security Council
وفيما
resolutions.
يخص تعاون الدولة
With
الطرف
regard to the
موضوع
cooperation of the
التفتيش،
inspected
فقد
state
قدمت
party, it
المساعدة
provided
والدعم
assistance,
والوصول
access
بما في
and
ذلك
support,
المسائل الإدارية
including
واللوجستية
administrative and
بناء على
logistical
طلب فريق
matters.
التفتيش.
Upon
لم
the
يكن
request of the
هناك
inspection team,
تأخير
there
خلال
were no
فترة
delays
التفتيش.
during the inspection
انتهى
period.
الاقتباس.
End of the quote.
إن هذا دليل إضافي
This is
على مدى
further
تعاون سوريا
evidence of
مع
Syria's
الأمانة الفنية.
cooperation with the technical
السيد
secretariat.
الرئيس،
Mr. President,
تأسف سوريا لقيام بعض
Syria
الدول الغربية
regrets that some
بالعمل على
Western
اعتماد
countries
قرار
have worked
خلافي
to adopt a
مسيس
controversial
خلال أعمال
politicized
دورة
resolution
28
during the
لمؤتمر الدول
28th
الأطراف
session of the
الاتفاقية.
Conference of State Parties to the CWC.
وتجدد سوريا التأكيد
Syria reiterates
أن هذا القرار
that this
يأتي في
resolution
محاولة
comes in
لإطفاء
an attempt
المشروعية
to
على
give
التدابير
legitimacy
القسرية
to the
وحديث
unilateral
الجانب
coercive measures
المفروضة على الشعب السوري،
imposed on the Syrian people.
والتي أكدت الأمم المتحدة
The
مرارا
United Nations
عدم
has
شرعيتها
time and again
وانتهاكها لحقوق
confirmed that
الإنسان
these measures
بما
are
فيه
illegal and violate
حقه
human rights,
بالتنمية
including the right to development.
وإلحاق المزيد من الأضرار
They cause
بالقطاعات
further
الاقتصادية
damage to the
والصناعات
economic
الحيوية
sectors and
بما
to
فيها
vital
صناعة الأدوية،
industries, including the
وذلك
pharmaceutical
في
industry.
الوقت الذي تبذل فيه
This,
الحكومة
at the
السورية
time when the Syrian
قصارى
government is
جهدها
making
لتحسين
every
الأوضاع
possible effort
الإنسانية
to improve
وتوفير
humanitarian
الخدمات الأساسية
conditions
لمواطنيها.
and provide basic services to
ختاما
its
السيد
citizens.
الرئيس،
To conclude, Mr.
تجدد
President,
الجمهورية
the
العربية
Syrian
السورية
Arab Republic
إدانتها
renews
استخدام
its
الأسلحة
condemnation
الكيميائية
of the use of
من قبل
chemical
أي
weapons
كان
by anyone,
وفي أي
at
زمان
any time,
ومكان وتحت أي
anywhere,
ظرف
and under
كان.
any circumstances.
وتؤكد سوريا على أنها أوفت بجميع التزاماتها بموجب الاتفاقية ودمرت كامل مخزونها الكيميائي، وهي تتطلع قدما إلى المضي قدما في تعاونها القائم مع الأمانة الفنية لمنظمة حظر الأسلحة الكيميائية لإغلاق جميع المسائل العالقة وصولا إلى إغلاق هذا الملف بشكل نهائي. في هذا الصدد يؤكد وفد بلادي على ضرورة الحفاظ على الطابع الفني لهذا الملف بعيدا عن التسييس الذي طغى على عمل منظمة حظر الأسلحة الكيميائية وألحق أضرارا بالغة بمصداقيتها ومهنيتها وحياديتها. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Syrian Arab Republic. I now give the floor to the representative of Islamic Republic of Iran.
In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, Mr. President, I congratulate Japan for assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month, and I acknowledge Guyana for its successful conclusion of the presidency in February. We welcome the presence of Mr. Ebo, Deputy to the UN High Representative for Disarmament Affairs at today's briefing. Mr. President, Iran once again condemned in the strongest possible terms the use of chemical weapons anywhere by anyone, at any time and under any circumstances. We underscore once more that any investigation into the use of chemical weapons must be impartial, professional, credible, and objective, and must fully comply with the requirements and the procedures of the Chemical Weapons Convention. Equally crucial, the OPCW must be able to perform its duties in an impartial, professional, and objective manner to establish facts and develop evidence-based conclusion. We reiterate our call that the Convention must be implemented fully, effectively, and without discrimination. We believe that politicizing the application of the Convention and exploiting the OPCW for political reasons endangers the credibility of both the organization and the Convention. Mr. President, as a committed party to the Convention, the Syrian Arab Republic continues to uphold its commitments and cooperate closely with the OPCW. The Syrian National Authority not only submitted monthly reports detailing activities within Syria, but also actively facilitated the 26th round of consultations for Declaration Assessment Team by providing necessary facilities for the team's mission to succeed. Additionally, the Syrian National Authority facilitated the 10th round of inspection of the Scientific Studies and Research Center in December 2023. The reports of the Technical Secretariat confirmed that the Syria provided the required assistance, accesses, and support, including administrative and logistical matters, as requested by the inspection team to implement its objectives. This is another piece of evidence that the underscores Syria's ongoing cooperation with the Technical Secretariat. As such, on 27 February 2024, the OPCW Technical Secretariat informed the Syrian National Authority about the closing of 3 outstanding issues concerning Syria's initial declaration, with the remaining issues that could be closed. This significant development underlined the importance of keeping a non-political approach to this matter. We call on certain countries to refrain from making baseless political accusation against Syria or premature judgment before the conclusion of such consultation. Mr. President, we support the continued constructive dialogue between Syria and the OPCW to address any remaining issue and bring the file to a final and conclusive resolution. This approach is pivotal for ensuring transparency, accountability, and the satisfactory resolution of all outstanding issues. We regret that certain Western countries have pursued the adoption of a contentious and politicized resolution during the 28th session of the Conference of State Parties to the Convention. This resolution, unfortunately, seeks to further the political agenda of certain states and comes at a crucial juncture when the Syrian government is diligently working towards improving humanitarian conditions and the provision of essential services. We call on the constructive affairs of the Security Council and expect a positive role from the Council member. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Islamic Republic of Iran for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. We also thank Director Ibo for his briefing. This month marks the 13th year of the conflict in Syria. 13 long years of killing, gross human rights violations, deprivation, forced displacement, and unabated humanitarian crisis of catastrophic proportions. A whole generation living in despair and hopelessness. Of all these, chemical weapons attacks are among the most brutal and despicable crimes the Syrian people have been subjected to. The destruction and suffering caused by the repeated use of chemical weapons in Syria remain vivid in international communities' collective memory and conscience. In this respect, we need to continue pursuing with determination 2 fundamental objectives. First, prevent the recurrence of chemical weapons attacks in the future. Second, ensure accountability for the past uses of chemical weapons. And these 2 objectives are interlinked. Fighting impunity and establishing accountability is essential to effectively prevent recurrence. Whether by the Syrian regime or the terrorist organization Daesh, the use of chemical weapons is unacceptable under any circumstances. All perpetrators must be held accountable. Since the beginning of the conflict, Turkey has supported the UN and OPCW efforts to identify the perpetrators of chemical weapons use in Syria and to ensure accountability for such use. We will continue to provide necessary and appropriate contributions towards this end. Complete elimination of the Syrian chemical weapons program requires that the OPCW Technical Secretariat's efforts to clarify all outstanding issues are duly reciprocated. We call on the Syrian regime to comply with its obligations and to fully cooperate with OPCW in accordance with Chemical Weapons Convention and the Security Council Resolution 2118. Developments also reveal the dangers of chemical weapons falling into the hands of non-state actors as well as irresponsible states, and the danger posed by terrorist organizations developing the capacity to produce chemical agents. Especially now, under the current conditions, where the situation on the ground is becoming increasingly complicated in Syria, effective cooperation with OPCW is even more critical. Finally, Mr. President, as demonstrated by OPCW Director General's periodic reporting, as well as the recent reports of the Investigation and Identification Team and Fact-Finding Mission, there are significant developments on Syria chemical weapons file, which require continued and regular consideration by this Council. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Turkey for their statement. There are no names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
Republic of Venezuela, speaking on behalf of a group of friends.
Señor presidente, la República Bolivariana de Venezuela tiene el honor de hacer uso de la palabra en nombre del grupo de amigos en defensa de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas, cuyos Estados miembros, a pesar de las circunstancias que nos han obligado a estar hoy aquí reunidos, agradecen la convocatoria de esta sesión plenaria para debatir sobre un asunto al que otorgan gran importancia, especialmente en un momento de continuo deterioro de la situación sobre el terreno, lo que sin duda alguna requiere de nuestra atención y acción colectiva, la cual lamentablemente una vez más se ha visto obstaculizada por el uso del veto en el Consejo de Seguridad por parte de uno de sus miembros permanentes. Señor presidente, aunque se trata de tan solo una fracción de las décadas de ocupación continuada y de violencia, tanto sistemática como brutal, por parte de la potencia ocupante, han pasado ya casi 5 meses desde el inicio de esta última y lamentable espiral de violencia, muerte y destrucción que ha cobrado la vida de miles de civiles inocentes, particularmente mujeres y niños, así como de más de 150 miembros del personal de la ONU, aunado a la destrucción de cientos de hogares en la Franja de Gaza y de todos los componentes de la vida civil, y a lo que por si fuera poco, debemos también sumar el desplazamiento forzoso de más del 85% de la población. Han sido 5 largos y dolorosos meses en los que toda la población civil palestina de la Franja de Gaza ha estado viviendo en un verdadero infierno en la tierra, tal como lo describió el propio secretario general de las Naciones Unidas, en razón del implacable bombardeo contra Gaza, por aire, mar y tierra, y del inhumano y paralizante asedio que ha sido impuesto por Israel. Las cifras de esta guerra son cuando menos dramáticas. El número de muertos recién acaba de alcanzar los 30.000, una cifra que podría superarse rápidamente si la potencia ocupante cumple su amenaza de desplegar una operación militar en Rafah. Esta es quizás, y aunque tal vez sobra decirlo, una de las guerras más mortíferas y destructivas de la historia. Sin embargo, a pesar de la crudeza de las imágenes y de la abundancia de información sobre esta brutal guerra, que por primera vez en la historia está siendo transmitida en vivo y directo por sus propias víctimas, el Consejo de Seguridad sigue sin cumplir su mandato de mantener la paz y la seguridad internacionales, tal como está previsto en la Carta de las Naciones Unidas, debido a la falta de voluntad de al menos uno de sus miembros permanentes, que ha obstaculizado una vez más la mínima pero urgente exigencia del mundo entero, el llamamiento a un alto al fuego, es decir, la exigencia de lo único que detendrá el derramamiento de sangre, de lo único que detendrá el desplazamiento forzoso y de lo único que permitirá proteger a la población civil palestina, garantizando, entre otros, el ingreso de la asistencia que tanto urge para aliviar las catastróficas condiciones humanitarias, incluyendo el hambre generalizada, las enfermedades y la falta de refugio seguro. En ese sentido, aprovechamos esta oportunidad, por un lado, para encomiar el esfuerzo y el liderazgo de Argelia, miembro de nuestro grupo de amigos, en la defensa de la causa palestina en el seno del Consejo de Seguridad y en el ejercicio responsable de sus funciones como miembro no permanente de dicho órgano, al presentar un proyecto de resolución orientado a la acción, cuyo único objetivo era el de exigir un inmediato cese al fuego humanitario, en plena consonancia con lo que la humanidad entera también está exigiendo y por lo que está incluso marchando por cientos de miles en las calles de diversas capitales de todo el mundo, incluyendo en esta misma ciudad el pasado sábado, y también en plena concordancia con las propias disposiciones de la resolución A/S10/22, adoptada por abrumadora mayoría por esta misma Asamblea General. Ahora, en cambio, debemos lamentar sinceramente el voto negativo emitido el pasado 20 de febrero de 2024 por un miembro permanente del Consejo de Seguridad, así como las excusas brindadas entonces y nuevamente hace unos minutos en esta sala, lo cual ha impedido una vez más que ese órgano cumpla cumpla efectivamente su mandato y que esté a la altura tanto del momento histórico como de las expectativas del mundo entero. En consecuencia, hoy el Consejo de Seguridad sigue estando muy por detrás de las exigencias que ha realizado ya esta Asamblea General, que como todos sabemos es el órgano más representativo de las Naciones Unidas. Señor Presidente, como dijera apenas hace un par de semanas el Secretario General, durante la sesión informativa que tuvo lugar en esta sala en relación a las prioridades para el 2024, las Naciones Unidas deben recuperar su razón de ser, cual no es otra que la búsqueda permanente de la paz. Tenemos pues que dar pasos valientes en esa dirección a fin de dar de una vez por todas una oportunidad a la paz. Tenemos que actuar de conformidad con la Carta de las Naciones Unidas, ajustados a los principios más básicos del derecho internacional. Y tenemos que hacerlo ahora, en interés de la humanidad y de evitar más pérdidas de vidas humanas, incluida una hambruna generalizada que ya mismo empieza a sentirse sobre el terreno, tal como han señalado diversos expertos. Debemos cambiar el rumbo actual y debemos hacerlo ahora. En este contexto aprovechamos además para subrayar que la hambruna nunca debe utilizarse como método de guerra. Por lo tanto, tenemos que seguir presionando por la paz en todo el mundo, incluyendo en el territorio palestino ocupado y muy especialmente en Gaza, donde la población civil lleva ya demasiado tiempo soportando no solo un bloqueo inhumano, sino también más de 75 años de Nakba y de una ocupación colonial e ilegal, junto con una agresión militar continuada que ahora se ha convertido en una verdadera carnicería. Un primer paso hacia la rectificación de esta injusticia histórica y hacia la consecución de la paz sería precisamente lograr un muy necesario alto al fuego que sea plenamente respetado y con el cual se pueda entonces poner fin de inmediato a los bombardeos indiscriminados en curso contra toda la población civil y las infraestructuras civiles en la Franja de Gaza, algo que viola de manera flagrante las disposiciones del derecho internacional humanitario y para lo cual es igualmente necesario poner fin a la transferencia de cualquier medio para perpetuar aún más este ya prolongado conflicto. Estamos seguros de que esto no solo crearía las condiciones necesarias para construir una paz sostenible, sino que también facilitaría la labor de los actores humanitarios sobre el terreno, incluida la entrada de la ayuda que se necesita desesperadamente, incluyendo suministros para salvar vidas. En este orden también aprovechamos esta ocasión para solicitar un mayor apoyo a los esfuerzos humanitarios destinados a proporcionar asistencia al pueblo palestino, incluyendo a través del Organismo de Obras Públicas y Socorro de las Naciones Unidas para los refugiados de Palestina en el Cercano Oriente, que sigue siendo un salvavidas para los refugiados de Palestina y que ha desempeñado, en particular durante estos terribles meses, pero también históricamente, un papel humanitario indispensable sobre el terreno, tal como ha sido reconocido por esta Asamblea General en diversas ocasiones. Privar deliberadamente de fondos al organismo solo pondrá aún en más peligro las vidas de los refugiados de Palestina y de los civiles desplazados que necesitan desesperadamente toda la asistencia y apoyo posible. Tales acciones precipitadas por parte de los países donantes violan además los compromisos previamente asumidos en esta materia. Por otra parte, y a la luz de los informes publicados recientemente por algunas ONGs y otros actores relevantes sobre el terreno, en los que se señala que Israel bloquea el ingreso de la ayuda a Gaza, renovamos nuestro llamamiento para que se hagan todos los esfuerzos necesarios para garantizar un acceso sin obstáculos de forma coherente, segura y a escala de la asistencia humanitaria, con el fin de satisfacer las urgentes necesidades sobre el terreno. Esto es clave, además está decirlo, para evitar el colapso total de la infraestructura civil crítica, lo cual de ocurrir inevitablemente conduciría a más víctimas civiles, a mayor hambre generalizada, a más enfermedades, a más pobreza y a un mayor sufrimiento humano y desesperación. En última instancia, de ocurrir, esto solo profundizaría aún más la crisis humanitaria y la ya catastrófica situación en Gaza, donde la mitad de la población civil está compuesta por niñas y niños y refugiados, y donde más del 85% de la población ha sido ya desplazada internamente. Señor Presidente, subrayamos que Israel, la potencia ocupante, debe respetar y acatar plenamente las medidas provisionales dictadas por la Corte Internacional de Justicia el pasado 26 de enero de 2024. Es decir, ya hace un mes en el que lamentablemente no hemos visto un cambio en su conducta, sino más bien la consolidación de un patrón de continuo y sistemático empeoramiento de la situación. Tampoco hemos visto a lo largo de este último mes una reducción en el número de víctimas o de los ataques contra la población civil, ni un aumento en el acceso de la ayuda humanitaria, mucho menos la formulación de cargos contra funcionarios públicos que inciten a la comisión de los actos previstos en la Convención para la Prevención y la Sanción del Delito del Genocidio. Todo lo contrario. En este contexto subrayamos la importancia de evitar la selectividad o el doble rasero en la aplicación del derecho internacional y de otras obligaciones jurídicamente vinculantes. Pues de ser así, solo se estaría envalentonando aún más al agresor a cometer, entre otros, nuevos crímenes o escaladas de violencia, así como aún más violaciones en masa a los derechos humanos. Enfatizamos a este respecto que es nuestra responsabilidad común impedir que se siga prolongando el imperante ciclo de impunidad. Del mismo modo, también exigimos que se adopten medidas urgentes destinadas a garantizar, por una parte, la seguridad y el bienestar de todos los civiles y, por otra, a facilitar la prestación de protección internacional a la población civil palestina en el territorio palestino ocupado, incluyendo Jerusalén Oriental y la Franja de Gaza, sobre la base de las resoluciones pertinentes de esta Asamblea General y del Consejo de Seguridad. Ahora bien, de cara al futuro y con la intención de que siga existiendo un horizonte político para la consecución de las legítimas aspiraciones nacionales del pueblo palestino, manifestamos nuestro pleno apoyo a cualquier iniciativa encaminada a abordar, entre otros, la cuestión de la membresía del Estado de Palestina en las Naciones Unidas, para que éste pueda ser finalmente admitido en el seno de nuestra organización como un miembro de pleno derecho. Confiamos en que el Consejo de Seguridad asumirá su responsabilidad, al menos en este respecto, si realmente toma en serio su compromiso con la solución de los dos Estados y con la implementación de las más de 90 resoluciones adoptadas por dicho órgano en relación a esta importante cuestión. Señor Presidente, el Grupo de Amigos en Defensa de la Carta de la ONU reafirma su firme compromiso con la justa causa palestina, así como su inquebrantable solidaridad con el heroico pueblo palestino en su lucha por alcanzar la realización de sus derechos inalienables, incluyendo a la libre determinación, a la independencia y a la libertad. Reafirmamos además nuestro pleno y continuo apoyo a todos los esfuerzos encaminados a poner fin a la grave injusticia infligida al noble pueblo palestino desde la Nakba del 48. De igual forma, seguimos también firmemente comprometidos a redoblar nuestros esfuerzos, incluyendo a través de nuestra participación activa en todas las iniciativas internacionales destinadas a poner fin a la ilegal ocupación israelí y a lograr la independencia del Estado de Palestina, con Jerusalén Oriental como su capital y en las fronteras previas a 1967. Para concluir, al ratificar nuestro pleno compromiso de preservar, promover y defender la prevalencia y la vigencia de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas, subrayamos una vez más que una solución justa, duradera e integral a la cuestión de Palestina, en todos sus aspectos, incluida la difícil situación de los refugiados de Palestina y su derecho al retorno, de conformidad con el derecho internacional, las resoluciones pertinentes de las Naciones Unidas y la Carta Fundacional de nuestra organización, solo puede lograrse por medios pacíficos. De allí que llamamos a que se realicen esfuerzos urgentes, tanto para abordar las causas profundas de este prolongado y trágico conflicto, que tiene en su núcleo años de ocupación y sus consecuentes consecuencias, como para garantizar la rendición de cuentas. Señor Presidente, de manera muy breve y ahora en nuestra capacidad nacional, solo queremos hacer dos observaciones. Primero, que es evidente que el régimen israelí ya no responde